control the vertigo.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today I am covering an episode of The Twilight Zone. This is from Season 1, Episode 24. It is called Long Live Walter Jameson. Written by Charles Beaumont, this one, and directed by Anton Leader, starring a pretty familiar face to anyone who likes their genre stuff, which is Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy, famously the last man standing in the 1953 Invasion of the Body Snatchers. A very solid, 57, sorry. It's, he's the last man standing shouting at the traffic in that movie. Kevin McCarthy, interesting actor, and I have to say I really enjoyed this episode. Long Live Walter Jameson, written, as I say, by Charles Beaumont, essentially as a history professor who sort of reads out journals from the Civil War about a particular soldier. But a colleague of his goes and looks up that soldier in old photographs of the Civil War, and finds a picture of the man in question, Walter Jameson. Which is a bit staggering. He is engaged, Walter Jameson, Kevin McCarthy's character, is engaged to a doctoral student called Susanna Kittredge, and it is her father, Sam Kittredge, who is his colleague, an older man than him, but is his colleague who has looked up this thing. And he also, for example, they're playing chess and he notices his ring. Basically, the picture of this man from the Civil War has that ring, has a certain mole, and looks exactly the same as Walter Jameson. At which point he confesses he is indeed immortal. And basically, he was frightened of dying, and he paid an alchemist 2,000 years before to give him immortality, and it has worked. But the immortality comes with a price. It's interesting, he kind of underplays this, which I think suits that whole idea of someone who's been around for a long time. You kind of see that in a lot of versions of vampire stories. For example, Interview with a Vampire, there's some of the vampires in that have this sort of ennui about them, and Walter Jameson is. However, he insists he is in love with Susanna, but Sam Kittredge does not want them to marry because he knows that Walter will never age while Susanna does, and he'll get left behind. And basically, Walter outlives everyone he marries or fathers. He just lives to see them die, really, and he tucks himself away and hides. Interesting premises. This has been explored many times in literature and film and movies. Immortality is the Highlander, right? And as I say, various vampire versions of vampire stories sort of encompass that too. It's also done in the Kolchak series, in the Night Stalker, the second TV movie involving Kolchak, the Night Strangler, had an immortal also from the American Civil War who discovered a way of prolonging his life indefinitely. And indeed, this is also touched on an episode of Star Trek called Requiem for Methuselah from the third series. So we're talking 68, 69 there. That one was written by Jerome Bixby, though, but I really feel like he must have been influenced by this story from Charles Beaumont. There we have a man who is immortal through some, I can't remember the reason, but essentially it turns out he is also Leonardo da Vinci and Brahms. But that story doesn't quite gel. But I have to say, Jerome Bixby seemed to get fixated on this idea and indeed wrote a screenplay in the early 60s, which was never used. But then eventually, I think in a story he completed on his deathbed, he created a story called The Man from Earth, and it was made into a movie in the 90s. Interesting movie. I've seen it. One of those one location movies. It's basically friends who a man reveals he's immortal and starts to tell him about his history through the entire film. And I believe it was converted into a play, and it would suit a play because it's a one location film. So that often suits plays. So this idea kind of was permeating the air, and I think Charles Beaumont really nailed it. Actually, it is interesting. There's one scene where basically he says to Sam Kittredge, you can tell Susanna if you like, she won't believe you. And there's all this build up to it. Like Kittredge says, when did you join the faculty? Well, you said you were this old when you joined, but now you're this old. So that doesn't work out. He goes, okay, so some people were a bit vain. Are you saying I'm too old for your daughter? And he goes, in a way, yes. He's very kind of subtle, suggestive going on here. He essentially works out he's immortal and says it's not right. In the meantime, we see him walking across the lawn, and there's a little old lady watching him. A little old lady played by Estelle Winwood. It was an interesting character. I remember her most. She always a very vivid one. If you see her in any colour stuff, she's got bright blue eyes, vivid blue eyes. And she was like one of the frisky old ladies in the Mel Brooks movie, The Producers. One of the most memorable ones as well. Hold Me, Touch Me, I think was her thing. And that kind of made me laugh, seeing her in this. And she looks quite the same, actually, in this. And then in The Producers, which came 10 years later. And it turns out she was a former wife of Walter Jameson. And she saw a press cut-in, for the marriage and recognised him. And sort of says, you can't go on doing this. And essentially, it turns out she shoots him. And at that point, he rapidly ages. Now, the aging effects are quite cool. You see, in camera, you see him visibly age, and then there's cutaways and comes back, and he's older and older and older. And eventually turns to dust because he's been, around for so long, 2,000 years. So she stops this long, long life because she realises how much he's hurting people. By this process. And indeed, Susanna and Sam stumble across it, and Susanna's like, that's his clothes, where's that dust from? And he just persuades her to leave the room. I think she kind of knows, but doesn't know. It's one of those kind of setups. There we go. Now, the aging effects were actually using the same techniques as was used in the 1931, I think, movie, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where essentially what they did is they painted sort of lines on the actor's face in red, but then because it was black and white, they could flood the lighting as red, so the lines wouldn't show up, and then slowly fading from red to green, and the lines would appear, and they used the same effect. And interestingly, the makeup artist, who was a very renowned makeup artist, and I'm trying to remember his name, it was Walter something. I can't remember. Maybe I'm confusing it with the name of this episode. It is mentioned in the Twilight Zone Companion, though. Is a fairly sorry, I can't find it. He was a fairly prominent, been at Wells around a long time, obviously doing a film in 1931, and one of the things he commented was he charged $25,000 for it to do in 1931 for the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which was a very effective effect. He only charged $500 for the effect in this episode, but using exactly the same paint and techniques. So it was an interesting one. I really like Kevin McCarthy in this. He also did a commentary on this particular episode where he mentions this is, apart from Invasion of the Body Snatchers, this is the second most things fans talk to him about. And he's kind of taken with it and finds it quite fascinating. It's kind of funny to watch him talk through the episode. He actually says, sorry, I've got to stop talking, I need to watch this bit because it's really interesting and stuff like that. And he also makes a comment that he's got he has got one of them faces where he doesn't seem to age, and his family's much the same. He's got that sort of genetic predisposition. So he says, even when I made this, I kind of wasn't aging. He makes a little joke, which I found quite cool and fun. I did like the sort of two-hander approach where it was basically him and Sam Kittredge. Susanna was in it too, but basically it was two men talking about what's going on here. It wasn't Rod Serling's story, but it was a very solid story. And I'm getting to a point now where I've always held that my favourite anthology show is actually The Outer Limits. But I have to say I'm not starting. I have converted. Outer Limits can be hit and miss. And there's been a few weak stories, though there's been some incredibly strong ones and interesting ones. But I have to say, I feel like Twilight Zone's more consistently good. There's not that many weak episodes. I think because it's shorter, it's punchier. They don't have to sort of extend it too much. I mean, some of the Outer Limits episodes feel a little padded. But something about this one I really like. Now, this one is not really particularly big on any lists, I don't think, in terms of best episodes ever, but I thought it was a very, very solid one. And it seems that the fans of Kevin McCarthy agree. And he says he did say, as I say, approached by fans with this, but also a lot of fan mail he gets, or he got around about this episode too. So that's kind of interesting. I like the title, Long Live Walter Jameson. It's kind of fun. And ironic as well. I don't think I talked about the air date. It aired for the first time on the 18th of March 1960. That was the air dates. And as I say, episode 24. Very solid episode. Big recommend. So I think I'll wind it up there. But before I go, I ask, is anybody out there?
I'm not.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to